Hello there, welcome back to another Turo Lessons Learned video, and today I'm going to do a 2023 recap. So this is our first year in business where we have at the end of the year 12 cars. So let's jump right in. All right, so to follow up on my last video, which was 11 months with 12 cars, I told you about a problem that we encountered with our projected revenue stream centered around the Hyundai and Kia National Highway Transportation Safety Administration safety recall because of brake problems. Well, that occurred right at the end of September. And of course, we were optimistic that it would be resolved fairly quickly, but in retrospect, there are about 3.5 million cars that have this safety recall. Now, our problem was really a very simple one. We had 12 cars on our Turo fleet, all of which were listed and earning money, or at least potentially earning money. And then 4 of the cars got delisted by Turo. So overnight, 1/3 of our revenue stream was essentially truncated. Now, fortunately, we'd paid cash for these cars, and so we were not making note payments, and the fact that they weren't earning revenue for a little period of time wasn't a major problem. However, we didn't know, and we still don't know, how long it's going to be before the safety recall has a fix kit that Hyundai is able to send to the dealership so that we can get our cars fixed. So we hung in there for basically 3.5 months after the recall, and through the end of the year, kept those cars. Now I'm going to talk in a moment about what our strategy has been, what changes we're making going forward. But bottom line is at the last video that I did, this was the snapshot of our revenue stream up through the month of October. And the chart that you see below is what we had hoped, and based on the knowledge that we had, what we expected our revenue to, how we expected it to recover, with the expectation that the fix for the safety recall would be distributed to dealerships somewhere before the end of the year, preferably, hopefully in November. That didn't happen. So here is what our year ended up looking like. As you can see, October, November and December are virtually flat in terms of revenues, and so that is the last 3 months. This chart that corresponds essentially with the line chart underneath corresponds with the Turo revenue chart. Now there was a lot of fluctuation, real peaky ups and downs in the last few months. And generally speaking, the November Thanksgiving timeframe was a high rental rate timeframe, as was the week generally before and right after Christmas. However, that has not really been the case since the first of the year, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So you had some real big swings, and if you've had very many cars on Turo for any length of time, you know that it's really difficult to understand their payment algorithm, because they do not pay every day. They might go a couple of days, 2 or 3 days at a time without sending any money, and then send you a big lump. So it's real hard to predict your weekly revenue, and in fact, some weeks are thin, some weeks are better. Even though you may have a very steady rental rate, you're going to have big swings in your actual weekly cash flow, which is what you're seeing on the line chart below. So I want to recap how we did for 2023. We had 2 main revenue streams. We had rental income and repair reimbursements, and you can see that we had a total of about $66,000 in income in 2023 from our fleet. Now, we didn't make nearly as much money as we expected to going into this business. Basically, we had $51,500 in total expenses and a net income of about $14,500. Now, the biggest chunk of those expenses is vehicle-related expenses, things like tires and oil changes and all of that sort of stuff. And the repairs line item, which is anything from an air conditioner to maybe a rack and pinion steering gear or a complete engine replacement. Repairs alone were $31,400, of which almost $9,000, $8,500 plus, was for 2 engine replacements. And those were really unexpected, major expenditures. One of them, we believe, was really caused by a client, which did, by the way, reimburse us directly for $2,000. That it did not go through the revenue that you're seeing reflected on the above. That's basically a cash payment that defrayed other expenses. But in any event, we had $8,500 of massive expenses for engine replacements, as well as a lot of other repairs. Now, generally speaking, we don't mind the repairs because our philosophy or strategy is that we're going to get an older car. We're going to repair it and be glad to repair it and bring it into a really high quality condition with the expectation that in the future repairs will be less, especially there will be this a heavy front end load of repairs when you buy a car, and then after a while the those repairs will be less because the essential rebuilding of the car to a high quality condition will have been completed. So when we look back on this first year, you can see that I've done a little analysis. I'm estimating that I probably spent about 20 hours a week on an every week basis, some weeks more, some weeks less, but I'm going to say about 20 hours a week dealing with Turo related things. And so when you factor the 14,000, and that comes to about 1,000 hours a year. You divide the $14,500 of income. I probably earned about $14.50 an hour for my time, which I think, we'll all agree is not real exciting. Now, the good news is that we have a whole bunch of assets that are still generating revenue, and we expect that 2024 will be a year with less repairs on the vehicles that we move into 2024 with. In fact, if we analyze a couple of major things that occurred in 2023 and go back and say what were our expectations, well, we expected to have 3 months, maybe a little over, but 3 months of income from 4 cars. And if you factor in what that expectation is, that's at least another $7,500, $8,000. So if we add that back, and then if we reduce our total expenses by the $8,500, $9,000, we would have, if we hadn't had the safety recall and we didn't have the 2 big engine replacements, we would have had a net income of $31,000 out of $74,000 in income, and that would have made the sort of the hourly compensation rate, if you want to look at it that way, about $31 an hour. So it would have had a significant impact on improving our return on investment or the value that we're creating out of this. Now, again, we still have the assets. They're still capable of generating revenue. And so we look forward to the future. But every business, you don't know what you don't know until you find out about it. That's basically Murphy's Law. We did not have any way of predicting or knowing that we should have diversified our fleet because of the risk of having 1/3 of our revenue generating assets be delisted because of a safety recall. And we had no way of being able to predict that 2 of the vehicles would need engine replacement. So, Murphy constantly, for every business, especially new businesses, rears his ugly head and shows you what you don't know. And it happened with us. You can expect that if you decide to get into this business. Okay, so now let's talk about looking forward into 2024. So I'm going to just lay out what my expectations for 2024 kind of in a broad brushstroke are. I expect that our gross revenue for this year will be about 100,000. Actually, just a little over. I'm predicting a little over 100,000, but I'm going to use big round numbers. I'm expecting that our total expenses will come in about half of that, about 50,000, and that our net income will be the other half. I'm expecting that in 2024, my time invested in this business will increase a little bit to about 25 hours a week. And if these numbers pan out, that'll end up being around 40 bucks an hour for my actual time invested in watching over and managing the Turo fleet that my wife and I have. By the end of the year, I expect that we'll have at least 15 vehicles, and we should be generating right at $2,000 a week on average in the way of cash flow. Now, that's not profit. That's just the gross revenue that we should be generating each week by the end of the year. In fact, I actually am predicting that that number will be at least or just a little bit larger. Now, I want to do a kind of a quick recap of what we're going to change in 2024. So looking back at year-end 2023, we had 12 vehicles. This is our vehicle list. And the 4 vehicles listed, there's 5 vehicles listed in red. 4 of them, the Accent hatchback, the 2 Elantras, and the Veracruz, were vehicles that were caught under the safety recall, and they were delisted. Now, the Hyundai Genesis is a different story. The Hyundai Genesis is a vehicle that, even though I pulled the Carfax on it and it said that the vehicle didn't have any known wrecks, we bought that vehicle. I thought it was a great vehicle, thought it was a good investment. And in retrospect, it probably had been in a major wreck. And there were and are still significant issues with that vehicle. And, we put way too much money into it. That was actually one of the vehicles that had an engine replacement. Now, it wasn't a full-blown engine replacement. A check engine light had come on. I thought that I could get to my mechanic, which was way too far away. And I overheated the engine. And we had to take the heads off and have them remachined and put back on. So it wasn't a complete engine rebuild, but it was still a very expensive, repair job. So I'm calling it an engine rebuild, and it cost about $4,000. So in addition, it had a lot of other issues. And so we've just decided that we're going to sell the car and take the money that we make from it and reinvest in a car that really fits our profile better. And so that's why it's listed in red. We still have 5 Volkswagens, 1 Mazda CX-7, and we had sold a Mitsubishi Mirage last year. So forget the Mirage. We ended up with those 12 vehicles, which are the ones you see. Now, we're already beginning to change the mix of vehicles. We have sold 3 of the Hyundais, and I've got the Hyundai Genesis up for sale on Facebook Marketplace. And, here's the situation with the safety recall. We still don't know. We're not getting any communication at all from Hyundai about how long it'll take for them to get those fix kits out into the dealership's hands. And so rather than sit on these cars for what might be another 3 or 6 months before Hyundai can get the 3.5 million fix kits distributed, manufactured and distributed, we just decided to go ahead and sell the cars and change our mix of vehicles. Now, we've kept the Veracruz because I needed a driver, and we're going to go ahead and just wait on it because it's a really solid car. But we've decided to start adding vehicles, and we have so far added 2 vehicles. So we've gotten rid of 3, and we've added 2 vehicles. One is a 2019 Mitsubishi Mirage with 62,000 miles on it, and the other is a 2019 Dodge Caravan with 55,000 miles. Now, the theory, the strategy here, and these two vehicles are kind of experiments. We're looking for at least a couple of vehicles that are much newer, much lower miles, and we're hoping that the repairs, and not damage repairs, but just repairs and maintenance issues will be less. However, even at this point, I'll tell you that I've already had to put $1,000 into the Dodge Caravan to fix a motor mount and a couple of other little issues, but motor mount was kind of the big thing. So, not off to a real great start there, but again, it feels like, and the mechanic tells me that it's a really solid car, so we're hoping that there's not going to be much in the way of repairs for these relatively low mileage, late model cars. The Mirage is proven, even so far, to be very popular. There's a very high utilization rate on it. And so far, we haven't had any maintenance. We've only had it for a couple of weeks at this point, but it's looking pretty good. The Dodge Caravan, like I said, has already had one repair issue. It has not been very utilized. We're still trying to adjust our price to find out. And the month of January is a really slow month. If you listen to all the people out there that talk about that have been around for several years, how January is a slow month. It's a great month for maintenance. It's a great month for taking vacations and things like that. I expect that as we move into the spring and the summer, that the Dodge Caravan will both have a higher daily rental rate and the utilization will go up. Now, as far as additional cars go, because those are the only two, those are our experiment cars. They're in the newer model and lower mileage range, significantly lower mileage range than what we have traditionally purchased. So we will be looking for additional cars. Those additional cars will be typically $4,000 to $5,000 cars that we'll find on Facebook and that we'll expect to spend about $1,000 on, fixing and repairing and making them and putting them into better condition. That was our strategy last year, and quite honestly, it worked great on the Hyundais. If the Hyundais hadn't been delisted because of the safety recall, we'd still have them, and they've been great cars. So when they get that issue fixed, we may buy a couple of them, a couple back, or not those back, but buy a couple more to add to our fleet. But generally speaking, we're going to be looking at things like Mitsubishi Mirages and G4s, Mazda CX-7s, Mazda 2s, and again, the Hyundai lineup, Hyundai Kia lineup when they get the safety issues fixed, because most of the cars that we would buy in from that make would be cars that are kind of right in the middle of the recall notice. So we've got to get that resolved before we can go back to a Hyundai. So some of the lessons that we've learned as we look back on our first year are this. First, don't buy cars with custom wheels. Custom wheels often have custom lug nuts. It's better to stick with cars that have standard factory wheels, whether they're steel wheels or alloy wheels. It doesn't really matter, but sometimes you find cars that you can buy that somebody has customized, and it's best just to stay away from custom wheels because they have a tendency to, when they break, you have a problem replacing them. You can't just get a steel wheel and put a hubcap on. You have to go, people do run into curves. I mean, if you don't know that, you're going to find that out as a Turo host. They do run into curves and they break wheels. They break suspensions and things like that. So don't buy cars with custom wheels if you can avoid it. Don't buy cars with big engines. One of the issues that I've discovered is, especially with now people will drive almost any car fast. And when I consider fast, anything over 90 miles per hour. But in particular, like with the Volkswagens, they come in a couple of different engine sizes, 2 liter and 2.5 liter. And I think they might even have like a 1.8 liter engine in some of the Jettas. Stick with the 1.8 liter and the 2 liter engines. Don't go with a bigger 2.5 liter engine. I'll tell you, it's much more fun to drive. I love driving those cars with the 2.5 liter engines, but every single one of those cars, as well as the Tiguan with a turbo on it, people want to drive them over 100 miles an hour. And you can tell them, you can ask them, you can say, hey, please don't drive it fast, and they're going to do it anyway. And so having cars that are a little bit on the underpowered side is going to somewhat reduce the temptation for people to drive the car too fast and abuse the car and potentially damage the car, damage themselves. I mean, all kinds of bad things happen with people that speed, so that's not good. We're going to put bouncy trackers on every car. We did not have them on all of our cars, but we now have bouncy trackers, and you can set those things up to alert you for issues with the with the speeding, and we do that. I get notices, and then when I get a notice that somebody's speeding, and I go in and see that I set a limit of 90 miles per hour. If you go faster than 90 miles per hour, I will send you a text message through Turo, so it's documented, as soon as I notice it and ask you to slow down. I also have automated messages that go out through the Turo system asking people to not go faster than 90 miles per hour. In fact, telling them that it's a violation of Turo's abusive use policy, which it is. And so then once they've received that notice, and then if I text them specifically that, hey, you're driving too fast, slow down, and I'm not shy about telling them that. I literally tell them, hey, you're driving too fast, slow down. So far, everybody that I've had to do that with has, in fact, slowed down. So that seems to be working. I think I've found a local mechanic. The mechanic that I had was a 30, 40-minute drive away. It was halfway across the Metroplex. He was a great mechanic, but, it just makes it real hard to get cars to somebody when you have to drive halfway across the DFW Metroplex. And so I think I've found a good mechanic that's only about a 10 or 15-minute drive from where I am in far, far north Dallas. He's relatively new in business, is kind of hungry, and so hopefully that relationship will turn out to be a good one. And he's actually closer to me than the dealership for the Volkswagens. I've got a fleet relationship at the dealership, and they've done good work, but they're always more expensive. And so I need to do everything I can to avoid spending money at dealerships because they just charge so much money. We're going to try to buy cars as we buy new vehicles. They need to be under 100,000 miles, really trying to get them into the 80, 90,000 mile range, kind of in that zone. And so that we think will also cut down on the maintenance. Now, there are people that get into Turo that have a lot of skills when it comes to fixing cars, and they like fixing cars. I mean, I can change light bulbs. I can change... I can clean seats. I can maybe change a window motor in a power window and a door. Change sunscreen visors and stuff like that. But I'm not a mechanic. I don't really want to get under the car. That's just not. I'm not interested in it. But that has a cost. That has a trade-off, which means I have to pay other people to do that stuff. If you're somebody that can get under the cars and do that kind of stuff, that's great. You'll end up saving yourself quite a bit. Of course, you're basically paying yourself to be the mechanic, but that's okay. I mean, if I was younger and interested in doing it, I would do it. One thing I'm going to be I've been good about changing the oil on the cars, but I'm going to be hyper diligent about changing the oil. Having two vehicles that have had major engine work, one complete overhaul, threw a rod through the crankcase, and the other one, overheated the engine. One of them was probably a client issue, but it might have been existing in the vehicle before we bought it. Don't really know. The other one was an issue of I didn't know what was wrong with the check engine. I shouldn't have driven it. I did drive it. Having a bouncy on every car also gives you the ability to check the check engine codes. If the check engine code is something like an emissions control valve or an oxygen sensor, you don't really have to worry about driving the car a little bit. But if the check engine light's something that could be damaging to the engine, then you need to get the car towed. So having a bouncy on is going to give us the ability to not only check engine, but remotely. When somebody's driving the car, we can see if a check engine light comes on. And then we can reach out to them and say, hey, don't worry about it, or hey, stop driving the car. But we're going to be hyper diligent about oil changes. All right, so that's a summary of what we learned, major things, what we're doing different as we go forward into 2024. We're extremely excited about the Turo business that we have. We think, again, that we'll be able to add significantly to our fleet. One last thing I have learned, no matter how many cars we have in our fleet, it's almost never that 100% of the cars are actually actively listed on Turo and generating revenue. We've had a few times where when we had about 7 or 8 cars, when we had every single car making money for a couple of weeks at a time. That was actually pretty sweet. But once we kind of got over the 10 car or into the 10 car range, we have found that there's almost always some reason why about 10% of the vehicles, in other words, about 1 car, occasionally 2, they're either in the shop being repaired or they have to be taken off for a maintenance issue that's not major, but it might be a couple of days. But there's almost always, when you reach the 10 to 12 car point, you almost never have all 10 to 12 cars actively earning money for you. So as you're doing your projections for future revenues, it's a good idea to factor in about a 10% downtime on your vehicles. That just seems to me to be kind of a general rule of thumb that I think is going to end up being the case as we go forward into having more vehicles. But we're excited about getting more vehicles and adding to the fleet, and think that within a couple of years we'll actually be able to have $100,000 in revenue net coming in from our Turo fleet. So we're real excited, and I hope you found this interesting, and we'll see you on our next video. Thanks.